Welcome to Sacred Echoes of India. In this segment, we are going to take a closer look at India's foreign policy, its consistent stand for peace, diplomacy, and global cooperation, and why, despite doing so much right, does India still struggle to gain the influence it deserves in international forums like the United Nations. While countries that support terrorism or use pressure tactics on other nations often hold the upper hand, it's a story of ideals, power politics, and the urgent need for reform in the global order. India, the world's largest democracy and an emerging economic powerhouse, has consistently upheld a foreign policy rooted in non-alignment, peaceful coexistence, and multilateral cooperation. Yet, despite being a responsible global actor and a strong advocate of international peace and development, India remains on the sidelines of major global decision-making bodies like the United Nations Security Council. In contrast, some nations accused of supporting terrorism or bullying weaker states often enjoy disproportionate influence. India's post-independence foreign policy has been built on ethical diplomacy. During the Cold War, India refused to join either the Western or Soviet blocs, advocating for peaceful coexistence and a multipolar world. India championed anti-colonial movements in Africa and Asia, advocating self-determination and equality among nations. India has been a consistent victim of cross-border terrorism and has taken a firm stand against terrorism in all its forms, calling for a global consensus. India is one of the largest contributors to UN peacekeeping missions, often putting boots on the ground where others do not. India has taken progressive steps in global climate negotiations, especially through the International Solar Alliance. Despite this track record, India remains excluded from the United Nations Security Council's permanent membership. Even as global power dynamics have shifted dramatically since 1945, the structure and politics of the United Nations expose the limitations of moral diplomacy in a system driven largely by realpolitik and historical legacy. The 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, the US, UK, France, Russia, and China, were granted their status in 1945 based on World War II outcomes. This structure has not evolved to reflect the rise of countries like India, Brazil, or South Africa. The P5 use their veto power to protect their interests, often disregarding democratic or moral concerns. China regularly blocks India's attempts to designate Pakistan-based terrorists under UN sanctions. Political alliances and strategic interests often trump justice or transparency. Power in the UN system stems from economic clout, military strength, strategic positioning, and alliances, not just ethics. Countries that act aggressively or unilaterally, sometimes in violation of international norms, are still courted by major powers due to geopolitical location, natural resources, economic markets, military capabilities. For instance, nations with troubling human rights records or sponsorship of extremist groups continue to receive arms, aid, and diplomatic support if they align with the strategic goals of powerful states. India often prefers a strategic autonomy and avoids taking sides in major conflicts, which limits its leverage in high-stakes diplomatic negotiations. Moreover, India's soft power and moral authority, while widely respected, don't always translate into hard influence within power-centric institutions like the UN. India has been a vocal proponent of UN reform alongside countries like Japan, Germany, and Brazil. It advocates for expanding permanent membership to reflect 21st century realities. However, P5 resistance, particularly from China, has stalled meaningful progress. India is increasingly engaging with multilateral groups like the Quad, BRICS, IPSA, and ASEAN. These alignments strengthen its global profile and help counterbalance entrenched power blocs. Ultimately, power in international relations is partly about perception and capability. India's growing economy, its defense modernization, and leadership in technology and climate issues enhance its global weight and must be strategically leveraged. India's foreign policy is a testament to diplomacy rooted in principle, restraint, and constructive engagement. But the United Nations remains a product of power politics, not moral rectitude. Until institutional reforms democratize global governance, nations like India will need to blend idealism with realism and ethics with strategy to secure their rightful place in the world order. Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more insightful videos. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.